Trustee Boyd,
Here.
Trustee Davidson,
Here.
Trustee Doss,
Here.
Vice President Duran,
Here.
President Hinckley,
Here.
Superintendent Wells.
Here.
All right, I will open up for public comment on matters we're discussing in closed session. If you would like to make a comment, you may step to the podium. I don't see anybody here. Or you can raise your hand. I see no attendees. I'm looking at the right thing, right?
There's no one in the Zoom. Yeah.
Okay, so we close public comment. We will now adjourn to closed session and return to open session at 7 p.m. All right, I am calling to order our regular board meeting of Tuesday, September 27th. Can I get a roll call, please?
Student trustee Yuneli Garcia Bustamante.
Here.
Thank you. Student trustee Allison Dana.
Here.
Trustee Melissa Boyd.
Here.
Trustee Veronica Davidson.
Here.
Trustee Brian Doss.
Here.
Vice President Clementina Duran.
Here.
President Sarah Hinckley.
Here.
Superintendent Frank Wells. Here. Thank you.
And now, this is our first in-person board meeting for some of you, so instead of me reading the Pledge of Allegiance on Zoom, you are welcome to stand and face our flag and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, or do so online if you care to join us. All right, can we have our student board members read our mission and vision statement, please?
The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Meeting norms. Maintain a focus on what is best for our students. Ensure a safe environment for all views to be expressed, treating each other, staff, and the public respectfully. Endeavor to find common solutions to issues through collaboration without sacrificing one's beliefs in what is best for students. Make a commitment to effective deliberation, each one listening with an open mind, while others are allowed to express their own points of view, even if one disagrees.
Thank you. There was no action taken in closed session this evening. I will take a motion to approve our agenda for tonight.
I move that we approve our agenda.
Don't forget to press
I
your
second.
And we no longer need to do roll call votes because we're in person. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? The agenda is approved unanimously. And we move to our spotlight on our food services program.
Wow, this is really, really neat because during the last 2.5 years, Sabina Finberg, our Director of Food Services, has been our hero here, shero here in the district, feeding not only our kids and families, even when schools are not in session, but just been a warrior in making sure we secure additional monies so that we can address our food securities. And tonight we want to take a moment to spotlight her and her program. So we turn it over to you.
Let me make sure I have this.
I'm not sure that one's set up. They moved the
Okay.
active podium over there.
I can't see this, right?
Sorry, we're just having a little technical glitch. Can you just bear with us for one moment?
Good thing I brought my notes.
We'll be able to share it. We just need a minute. Sorry, one moment.
Thanks. All right. Good evening, board members, Dr. Wells, Ms. Kim. It's a pleasure to be here in person again. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the participation in food service has pretty much stayed the same. You can see the comparison between the daily average from 2021 to 21, 22 to 22, 23. Next slide, please. So last year we were at about 12.5% of students participating in breakfast, and this year about 14%. Next slide. And for lunch, it's very close. Last year compared to this year, and next slide, 41% of students last year and about 40% of students this year in 22, 23. Next slide. Thank you. So for food distribution this year, you know, we're doing the California Universal Meals. More students are eating because of California Universal Meals than pre-pandemic. This year we are required to use the POS, the point of service system at all of our schools. So that's been a challenge to create new systems to use the POS because we have to get the kids through really fast because there's so many of them. So I commend all of the school secretaries and POS people who have been doing that and working really hard to make it happen. Yeah, at the middle school and the high school, the students enter their numbers on keypads, and the students have also been doing a great job remembering their ID numbers. It's especially at middle school, it takes a few weeks to get that going, but we're getting kids through really fast now, and it's been going very well. Next slide. As before, as last year, we're still dealing with food supply chain issues. This affects us in several different ways. We're still not able to get some food products, the commercial products, but even the commodity products that we use. The trucks have not been coming in. The food is just not available, so we've had to make some menu changes here and there. The food costs are higher. I'm still having to go shopping like several times a week to make sure that we have what we need. And even equipment that we want to purchase or equipment that we need for repairing our current equipment also just takes forever. So that is we are still being affected, but we're doing it. We're pulling it off. It's been a very challenging beginning of the year. My staff is doing a fantastic job. Next slide, please. The good news, though, there are a lot of highlights. The reimbursement rates are a little higher this year. It's $5.30 for lunch and $3.15 for breakfast. We are getting, we received KIT funds, which is the Kitchen and Infrastructure training funds that we were able to purchase some new equipment for the high school, and working on bringing in, I have like a little chunk of money to spend on some training, so I'm I'm in conversation right now with a company called Brigade that helps companies with solutions and training to, build their capacity and figure out what equipment we need to make the food better and do more with what we have. We're also working on improving our menus. We've added roasted vegetables. I was just talking to kindergartners today and found out that they're really liking the roasted vegetables, which makes me so happy. We've introduced we're trying to do some plant-based food too, and so we've introduced a new vegetarian chili. Second time we served it today, and it was a hit, so I'm also very excited about that. At the high school, we have some new items, a lot more plant-based options that people can choose to make plant-based themselves at the flavor bar that we have. And we've been also selling a lot of salads, so that is great. Same at the middle school. Another very exciting thing, it's actually happening tomorrow at Ocean View and at Cornell. I work with a company that brings in local fruit for schools, and he also does these educational farmers markets at elementary schools. and he's bringing a whole bunch of fruit and vegetables, sets it up like a farmer's market, and then has like an assembly. He gives out little fake money, and the kids actually get to buy with their fake money some like fruit and vegetables to take home. And they touch on science and math and history and nutrition. So I'm really excited. That's happening tomorrow, our first one, and then we're going to do Marin in November. Also, I've been in touch with a couple teachers at the middle school. There's a garden at the middle school, and we're working on a plan to turn our food waste, our food scraps from the kitchen at the middle school into vermicomposting, which is like composting with worms, to use in the garden at the middle school. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm also working with, I was hoping to have some news about this today, but actually the results are delayed for the California Farm to School Incubator Grant Program. There's a parent that of a former special needs student from Albany who has a farm for maintained by persons with intellectual developmental disabilities and their families. So it's a whole program for her son and other students. And she approached me about working together to provide us with organic fruits and vegetables from her farm. So hopefully she will get the grant and we'll be able to work together. But even if she doesn't get the grant, this is something that I want to pursue more to, work with farms small farms, local farms that have a mission that can also serve our students organic food. So that's very exciting. And we're still working with the Berkeley Food Network, Food Pantry, first and third Fridays of the month. We have a great turnout there, and we're really helping a lot of people. We're helping even a lot of AUSD staff and my staff make sure that they have lots of fresh fruits and vegetables and proteins and milk. And so that's been going really well. I'm so glad that we were able to continue that program that we were doing during the pandemic. Next slide, please. So looking at, you might be wondering, with the increased reimbursement rate, what are we doing with that money? Well, a lot of that money is going to the higher food costs, but also I have sort of three subcategories I'm looking at, making sure that we're including organic and local produce, like on our salad bars and salads and in our main dishes. I'm looking at the environmental impact, because I know that there's a lot of plastic that we use, and I really want to cut back on that. So looking at compostable containers, for example, at the middle school, maybe reusable utensils at the elementary schools, and trying out wooden forks and spoons instead of plastic at the high school and middle school level. So kind of different sites have different needs and different abilities based on, their dishwashing capabilities and all of that. So really looking at that. And then equipment, certainly food service equipment, especially in middle school, trying to upgrade that equipment, because that is kind of our older set of equipment. And just working with my staff to make sure, we're talking a lot about how we can change the food and what kind of equipment we need to do that. And then tech upgrades as well. I've replaced a lot of our old computers, still have a few more to do. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, we're working on, again, the middle school is next for the tech upgrade. Next slide, please. Julie? Oh, sorry. Thank you. That's me. Was that it? Oh, okay. Anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone's support. Dr. Wells, thank you for your kind words, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we want want to do questions? Are there any questions?
If you could stay there while we
I will stay
do
there,
questions,
yes.
yes. Yeah, we can clap now. What a concept.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, we can take questions. Trustee Das?
Yeah, I have like 3 questions. But first, thank you for all that you do. I've been to the program that's happening where we're giving out food and things like that, and it's great, and all the people in line. It feels good that everybody's getting help, and
Yeah.
everybody passing out the food is super energetic and smiling under their mask, and so it's great. Thank you. My 3 questions are, I've seen, I remember there was a time when like I went to one of the schools and they had like a tasting of the lunch menu for parents. I think it was at like a PTA meeting or something. Is that something that still happens throughout the district, or is it something that?
I haven't done that. The previous chef did that, but I would be open to that.
So I don't know if you know the previous chef at all, but
I do.
some people get that joke, some people don't. And then my other question, so that was a really cool thing. So I don't know if maybe we could bring that back. I'm sure Dr. Wells would be really excited to help you with it. The other question is, how do we currently market the breakfast and lunch programs in terms of like letting families know this is what's available, this is how much it costs, this is how you participate, this is where it's located, things like that?
It's free. Yeah, in the beginning of the year, I sent out information and, to all families, just sort of a reintroduction to the food service department and make myself available to answer any questions. And I believe that the information is also in the newsletters that the elementary schools send out. Not sure about the high school and middle school. But it is announced like at the beginning of the school year.
And my last question is, I know that you talked about like we get the reimbursements for breakfast and lunch, and then you reinvest those funds, in the program. But does that cover like all the costs? Were you saying you're doing like additional trips to Costco and things like that? That covers all the costs for those?
Yeah. I mean, it covers the increased cost for food, and sometimes it's increased because I have to go, shop somewhere to get it. So yes, it does cover that. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, my son had the chili today and was raving about it. He was so excited. So my one thing, and this is maybe not just you, but every day I have to look up what's for school lunch, and it is like a 6-step process to dig through the website to get to the menus. So I'm wondering if there's any way that we can streamline that so that we can make it that a kid could get online and push a button and find their school menu on the website, or I know we're not.
Do you have the mobile app?
No, I just go through the AUSD website, so we should get a mobile app.
Yeah, you can find that on the website, and once you get that, you'll probably never go to the website again. I mean, I look at it every day, the mobile app also, just to check in what every school is doing, yeah.
Okay, it might be helpful if we just sent a reminder home to families that you can get the mobile app, because we're not sending the paper ones anymore. Paper
okay.
menus. I haven't gotten one yet, so I think that would be really helpful.
Yes, it's much easier.
Trustee Dana?
Yeah, I'd just like to say on behalf of the students, thank you so much for all the work that you've done in incorporating students into the process. I have a couple of friends that work behind the counter, and they love it, and they think I think it's a really great learning opportunity, and I just really appreciate you involving the students in that way. And then also, I just had one question, and this was because I had a couple of students ask me when I told them that this was going to be on the agenda. But there were posters all over the school for the chocolate muffins, and I know that's a super huge hit. Is there a reason why they're not available every day?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there is a reason. So yeah, the chocolate muffins are very, very popular. I tried last year to get that project going, so I'm working with Miss Walden she was in charge of like the financial management side of it previously. And so this year she took it on with her business management class to make them, because it used to be with the special ed class. And so they're just learning. They made their first batch and they were so excited. And we have 4 trays of muffins for you. I'm like, great, that's gonna last 1 day. So now this week they're like, all right, we're gonna make 8 trays. And I'm like, okay, that's great. That'll last 2 days. So they are building up. They're learning how to make the muffins right, and how to, how much batter to put in,
Right.
and they have to order the ingredients, and I have to make sure that I have the ingredients for them. So it's a process.
Yeah.
It's a learning process for them, and it's a part of their class. But they were very excited to bring them back, and I know the students are super excited. So be patient with us. We're working.
No, of course. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you putting in the effort to bring them back.
Yeah, no, believe me, I've gotten a lot of emails and questions like, can we have the recipe? We just want to make them at home. And so, yeah. Any other questions?
I just wanted to make a comment or suggestion that the Environmental Action Planning Committee has a very long environmental impact plan, but one of the pieces of that has been looking at food service. And we actually talked about maybe having you come to a meeting to talk about what would actually work, given the constraints of things like dishwashers and available materials. But anyway, perhaps, I don't know if that's the kind of thing where someone else helping is more work for you or less work, but I think making that connection would be helpful. I think the high school students that are part of that conversation have been especially interested in focusing on that.
I would love to do that. Yeah.
We can get you some help.
I'm working with Ben Schleifer from the Center for Environmental Health, and I could, easily partner with him to, I'm already working with him to try to figure out a plan of like where we can make changes and, that will work for, it's kind of by each particular site. But yeah, I could bring him in and we could definitely do that. Yeah, because it's a lot to take on in addition to everything else. So having like support and being on a committee and doing it as part of a committee would be fantastic for me.
Yeah, and I think also I want to make sure that there aren't a lot of solutions that come out of that conversation that don't work for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it would be helpful to all be working on it together.
Absolutely. I am all for it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for this spotlight. I feel like we should have had snacks associated with it.
I'm sorry.
No, that's not on you. Maybe these chocolate muffins.
Yeah, come and get a chocolate muffin. Yeah, and if any of you are available tomorrow, you want to come by Ocean View. Cornell's going to be in the morning and Ocean View in the afternoon if you want to come into the farmer's market and check out what we're doing. It's going to be really fun. So, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this, and we will get the slideshow up on the website for folks that missed it. And thank you for everything you've done for the last 2.5 years. It's great to finally get to hear about some of it in person.
So. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi there.
We're out of practice. So we're now going to move to public comment on the spotlight.
On this item, yes.
Is that what you're?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes.
And you're in
You
the.
look so serious. I'm not here to threaten you, President Hinckley. This is actually for you, Ms. Feinberg. I'm making a comment on this because I personally felt that you didn't get enough recognition for your work. Obviously, I'm wrong, and I'm happy to see that. But if you have a few minutes, I do want to share a story with you. And that is that years ago, my son, Uli, who, by the way, is watching, so hello, my wife was sort of humble bragging to other parents about how not a picky eater he was. And you can see where this is going, right? That within a matter of days, weeks tops, he started becoming a picky eater. And it made it really difficult to plan for his meals, and more so when he started going to school. But last fall, he started having lunch at school. and he loves it. And he looks forward every day. He asks us what's on the menu. We figure out that printing out the menu, because we're old school, we have a printer, printing out the menu helps. So every day he reviews it. And there was this particular day when chili was on the menu. And I asked my wife, do you think he's going to like that? Because now we thought of him as a picky eater. And she thought, well, I know the textures that he kind of likes and the kind of foods, so definitely no. I mean, she could have bet on it. And he came back raving about it, to the point that one day one evening, days after he had had the chili, I was brushing his teeth, we were talking about something else, and he brought up the chili out of the blue. Nothing to do with anything that we were talking about. And at 7 years old, he recognized that that was funny that there was a non sequitur. So thank you so much for that. Thank you also for your staff. There's one particular person in your staff, Asimin, I'm forgetting her last name, but she's always been so kind to our kids, and we tried to connect with her during the pandemic, and it was because of you that we were able to reconnect with her, and so we're so grateful for that. And I'd also like to thank Trustee Doss, because I remember you before the pandemic, you were sort of the lone voice in the wilderness saying, let's expand this program and give it to everyone. And you can see there's one example of a family that has benefited from it. So thank you both.
Great, thank you. So we have a review and action item next, which usually we would do later in the meeting, but we're all very excited about this item, which is to ratify a tentative agreement between the Albany Teachers Association and the Albany Unified School District, and the accompanying resolution regarding the funds to pay for the agreement. And so I think who am I turning this over to? Superintendent Wells?
Yes, you can turn it over to me. We do have our Chief Human Resource Officer here, but I'll take it from here. Before getting to this, I wanted to provide an opportunity for our former negotiation chairperson for ATA to come to the podium and say a few words before we before the board take action on this item.
Yes, so on behalf of the ATA, we want to thank you, Dr. Wells, and the district team for working with us on this, and it was overwhelmingly passed, and we look forward to it being board approved tonight. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Do you mind putting it, the item disappeared? It feels like we're doing this all for the first time. It is a little more confusing because we also have Zoom. So I will just summarize there. The full agreement with, it's not redlined, but it's actually blue, but with strikeouts and insertions for the new language is available as part of the agenda packet. But the notable things that we came to agreement on were a 9.5% increase on the salary schedule, effective retroactively to July 1st, 2022, in addition to some new contract language on several items. And we're just incredibly happy, one, to have the funding to be able to really bring our staff pay closer to where it should be. And we all know that it's, we're not paying people who work in schools enough still. But this gets us to a place that I think we all feel really good about right now. And looking at where the economy appears to be going, at least over the last week, I feel, for one, very good that we've gotten this amount of increase locked in going forward. And we're also really excited about some of the provisions that we were able to agree to, including provisions that allowed teachers coming from other districts to bring more years of experience into where they end up on the pay scale, and we're hopeful that that will help us continue to attract very skilled, very experienced teachers, especially in an environment where there is a mismatch between the supply of teachers and the number of teachers that we really need, and we're just really hopeful that that, along with keeping our salaries and benefits very competitive, will help keep Albany schools as terrific as they are. So we're very excited. We hope that the staff are excited. We are later in this meeting opening negotiations for our other bargaining units, and so we may have updates in the future about how this pay increase will apply to the rest of the staff in our district. Today we need to do two things. I'm just going to describe those before we open it for public comment. We have to, and we can do it as one motion, but we have to both ratify the tentative agreement and adopt a resolution, which is also part of your backup materials, that details what impact this has on our budget and authorizes the district to release funds for that, for the cost of this salary increase going forward. So with that, I'll first open up to see if there are any board questions, and then try to figure out, it's hard to juggle all these windows. I'm not seeing any phone comments, but if while the board is talking, if you're on the phone and you'd like to comment on this item, you can raise your hand. And if you're in the room, you are welcome to stand and wait for the podium. All right, seeing no board questions or comments, seeing no one at the podium, seeing no one raising their hand on Zoom, I will open the floor to a motion for both items.
I move that we approve the ratification of the tentative agreement between ATA and AUSD.
I second.
Yes, we need to do both.
I also move that we approve resolution number 2022-23-08, designating certain general funds as committed fund balance.
I second that as well.
Do I say all in favor, or do you say that? I do. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Great. The resolution and ratification are adopted unanimously. We're very excited. And yeah, I also just want to thank our bargaining team, both bargaining teams, who some of our staff are in the back. We can't direct the camera to move to the back, but there are people back there that I am gesturing to that we are very appreciative of. So what a great way to start off the year. All right.
President Hinckley,
Yes?
I don't want to speak for all the board members, but I do want to, pass on our thank you and appreciation for all the teachers and all that they do. So if you could pass that on to your fellow colleagues, be greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, Trustee Dana.
I'd also like to say thank you so much. I think this is really needed because teachers impact students. Probably obviously they're the ones that work most closely with students. And so this is very much a student-centered issue, and I'm really glad that we're approving this tonight.
Great, thank you. And we now move to approval of our consent calendar for tonight. So once again, I'm looking in 3 different places for information. Can we? All right. Are there any questions or items that board members want to discuss on the consent calendar? Or a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move that we approve the consent calendar for this evening.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Consent calendar passes unanimously. And we move on to superintendent and board member reports, starting with Dr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair Hinckley. Tonight, I want to leave during this month with a quote from one of our American heroes. And it was Roberto Clemente. Any of you guys know who he is or have ever heard of him? He left us with a quote that caused me to have pause last week and really resonated with me. And I wanted to take a time out about our mission because I thought it was very aligned with what we're about as a school district. And it reads as follows, and I always do this to student trustee Allison Dana. She's my go-to at the board meeting. So if you'd be so kind to read the quote for us, I would appreciate it.
Of course. Anytime you have an opportunity to make a difference in this world and you don't, then you are wasting your time on earth. And that's by Roberto Clemente.
And I just thought it was fitting as a reminder about our mission as a district, as teachers and people who work with our youth. This is what the work is all about, making a difference in kids' lives so that they can have brighter opportunities. Madam Chair, President, that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. I have no report for this evening. I'm looking forward to hearing about the Budget Committee meeting tomorrow night, but it's been a week of no committee meetings, so no report. Vice President Duran.
Just 2 items quickly. The first is that most people in the community, I believe, know that this year, we were lucky to get money from the state because they're not so generous, but this past year, because of the pandemic, for the last couple of years, they've been anteing up a little bit. And so I just wanted to share tonight, in terms of the money that we have, my hope is that we could also have students be involved in the kinds of things they would envision, the things that they would like to see. If, say, they had $1 million, what would the students spend it on in terms of improving their school and their school climate? It was just a thought, given that we do have this money in the district, and it would be nice to have students have an opportunity to reflect on what they think is important, because it's primarily and always the adults that do this, and so I would really like to hear from the students. The second item is that we've been gone a long time, right? And it's always nice to see everybody in person. And I know one of the things that President Hinckley complained about all the time during Zoom was that she didn't have a gavel. Well, she now has a gavel officially, but during that time at home, I kind of thought about it. So in my many walks, I came across a gavel that I wanted to give her. So in case we have to go back to Zoom, she's...
This is awesome. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with it, but I will definitely find an appropriate use.
For the record, that's a hammer.
Use your imagination, Dr. Wells.
It is indeed great to be back. Trustee Doss.
I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that. But for my report, I did want to kind of cover a few things that I've been thinking about as my time on the board comes to an end. Thinking about, a lot of different things, and so I have them listed here. Thinking about the achievement gap, something that I talk about pretty often, and there's 2 reasons I talk about it. One, because students are in trouble, and so talking about it keeps it at the top of everybody's mind and reminds everybody that these students are in trouble. And 2, continuing the conversation, I think will lead us towards a resolution and a solution. And so that's why the 2 of the reasons why I always bring it up. Thinking about that and thinking about my own experiences in school, and I specifically remember all 7 teachers that I had from elementary school all the way through high school. I had 7 teachers that looked like me. I remember their names. I remember the experience that I had. I remember the classes. I don't remember the grade I got in all of them, but the ones I do remember were good. And the reason why I say that and the reason why it stands out is because it's a special experience when you go into the classroom and the teacher looks like you and the teacher can relate to you and share some of your experiences. And I think that it helps in terms of what you get from that class, what you learn from that class. And so I think that as we're moving forward and as we're making hires and as we're going through that process, thinking about what it might mean for a student to have a teacher that looks like them, and how currently at the elementary school level, our black students do not have that opportunity because there are no teachers that look like them at that level. So no matter what school they go to, whether it be Cornell, whether it be Moran, or whether it be Ocean View, if you're a black student in Albany, you won't have the opportunity to have a teacher at the elementary school level that looks like you. And that is troublesome. And that is something that we should fix. And it should be a 911 situation. Because saying that out loud feels uncomfortable to me. I know it feels uncomfortable to hear. Literally, we have black students in this district that will start from kindergarten and won't have any teachers that look like them until they get to middle school. And so we need to fix that. We need to fix it right away. And so that was the first topic. The second topic is our special education. Thinking about how we assist and how we help students. There are certain programs that we have. So there's reading intervention, there's math intervention. And so the way it's currently set up is we have these interventions in place to help these students. But when do those interventions take place? During school. So what happens is, if you have a student that needs help in math, then you pull them from reading, you pull them from a different subject, they get the help that they need in math, so then the following year, they excel in math. But whatever subject or whatever class you pulled them from, they then struggle in that class. Not in every case, but in some cases. But even if it's one case where you pull the kid from one class to help them with something, and then they now are behind in that, then we did that family and that student a disservice. So why do we do these interventions and give the help to these students during their school day? Somebody once said, well, maybe we could do it during PE. Okay, so now we have a student that's struggling, a student that's not doing well, so we're gonna punish them by not letting them participate in the fun activities during PE. That's not fair, because then we're doing another disservice to the student and they did nothing wrong. So I think we need to take a look at this and figure out how can we help these students without taking away that time. What can we do? How can we implement it? Can the student come early? Can they stay late? How can we figure it out to where we're not pulling them from one class because we're taking them from one class and then they're good, then we have to make up what they're missing in that class, so then they get behind there, and it's just kind of this back and forth, and it's really unfair to the students. So I would like to take a deeper dive into that and figure out why has that been the practice for so long. And I'm not just picking on Albany, because they do this same thing in Oakland, they do the same thing in Richmond, they do the same thing in El Cerrigo, Pinole, everywhere, from all throughout schools. And I don't know why it happens, why we're pulling the students from one class to help them with a different class, and then they're good, and then pulling them from a different class to help them with that. It makes no sense. So we should take a look at that. Maybe Albany can be on the forefront of making that change, and once everybody sees the benefit from it, maybe everybody will follow suit. We have to be leaders in that. What I'll say with that is that change will be hard. The change at the elementary school level, diversifying that staff, will be hard. But both of those things are necessary. They're necessary for our students, and they're necessary for the future of this district, because we have to set up our students for success, and we have to set them up the best of our ability, which Dr. Wells kind of stole my thunder because he had a quote, but I also have a quote, which is, those who have the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action. And we are currently in leadership positions, and with that, we have a responsibility to every student in this district. I don't remember the exact number, but every single one of them, not just the majority. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Davidson.
So Popsicle Wednesdays at Cornell will celebrate Latino Heritage Month con paletas. Did I say that right? Okay. And the pumpkin patch at Westbury kicks off soon, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Trustee Boyd.
Thank you. I just wanted to report on the first meeting of the year of the Student Achievement Committee. It was a wonderful meeting. We reviewed missions and goals of the committee and accomplishments from last year. We reviewed the purpose, funding, and goals of the LCAP, Local Control Accountability Plan. One thing that we discussed, which Vice President Duron brought to the attention of the committee were the particular challenges of student athletes, the high demands of that program and the difficulty of maintaining high grades given the intense commitment and time pressures to be a student athlete, and the ways that we might be intentional about providing extra support for those students. I'm looking forward to diving more into that so we can support those students who are accomplishing so much in their academic classes as well as in their athletic pursuits. And we also talked about our main goals for the future for this year, in particular, being the year that we're focusing on first. First and foremost, goal is to engage in a targeted listening campaign to find out how we can best serve and support our students who are struggling, being intentional about getting feedback from those groups in particular to figure out how best to support them going forward. So not just kind of taking guesses at what we think might be helpful, but really striving to do a better job than we ever have before to target and reach out to those who are having a perhaps more difficult time and figure out how we can bring our resources to bear to support those students and their families. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Student board members.
The Student Advocacy Committee is currently in the process of arranging elementary school site visits. We're aiming to begin these visits during the first week of October, and the groups going to the schools will consist of student advocacy members and will be in multiple classrooms during each visit, and they'll typically last 1 to 1.5 hours. The goal of these visits is to gather input from the elementary students about issues they find with their school site. And once we have completed all of our visits and gathered all the feedback, we plan on presenting these concerns with the board and collaborating to find ways to resolve them.
And also, I just wanted to say that's first weeks of October. We haven't necessarily set down any dates yet, but we want to make sure that we're giving the elementary schools their due notice. Also, at AHS, homecoming the week of October 10th is quickly approaching, and many students are involved in the sports and spirit aspects, such as the annual lip sync competition and decorating the school. So if you are the parent of a participating high school student, know that this is a busy time for them. And if you are a parent of a non-participating student and you think that they might be interested in participating, encourage them to talk to their class presidents or anyone in leadership to learn more about how to get involved, and they'll know who that is. And then the AHS Fall Choir Concert will take place on October 7th, and the AHS Fall Band Concert will take place October 10th, and these will both occur in the Little Theater.
The Marin PTA has reached 75 members, and they'll be celebrating with free popsicles on both campuses for the kids on Wednesday, on September 28th. And if you are wondering what becoming a member means, or if you want to sign up, you can check the PTA website for more information. The Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access Committee is hosting their first meeting on October 12th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. You can join online or in person at the Marin Portland Library. And school photos will be taking place October 20th and October 21st.
And then Ocean View has school photo days on October 13th and 14th. And I'd just like to respond to Trustee Theron earlier on your comment around like getting student voice around the fiscal sort of stuff that we have, the different conditions we have this year. And I think that's really important. Trustee Ward was just talking about the listening campaign for the Student Advisory Committee, and I'm sure you're aware of that. And then there's also the district goals 2.1, 2.3 that we're likely going to approve later this evening. I don't want to say anything around that because we haven't had that discussion yet. But Unelli and I also, in any other initiative, would be really grateful to support you on that, and we also support the initiative to do that. So, yes, very redundant. Thank you so much.
That concludes our report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do you want to say, Superintendent Wells, a word about the event on Saturday?
Well, this Saturday, we had much discussion in the spring about replacing and building a new track and football soccer field out there in Cougar Field. And we have completed the project. Staff and students have already started utilizing the field, but we want to give it its proper and have an opening ceremony. So this Saturday, October 1st at 9 a.m., we will have a ribbon cutting ceremony, which is really neat because we're going to have all the community coming out, and we're going to have the class of, is it 1968, I think? But it's going to be from the 60s, and that group's going to come out and say a few words and get real active and supportive of the community. So we're really excited about that. So we invite all to come out 9 a.m. this Saturday, October 1st at Cougar Field, our ribbon cutting ceremony.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to make sure that one got on the record. All right, we now open to public comment on matters not on our agenda. So if you're on the phone, if you're in the room, you may walk up to the podium. If you're on the phone, please raise your hand at this time, but we will do in-person comment first, starting with Neri. Go ahead.
Thank you, President Hinckley. So most of you in this room, or all of you, I assume, already know about this, but this is really for the benefit of those who are attending remotely. October 2022 is Special Education Awareness Month at AUSD for the first time, so thank you for passing the resolution a few weeks ago. And a special thanks to Trustee Doss for initiating that resolution last fall for one day and supporting the resolution for a full month this time. And thank you also to Trustee Doss and Trustee Boyd for your continued service on the Special Education Advisory Committee, to Dr. Wells for supporting UDL and multi-tiered systems of support, and for bringing in Dr. Biggs, and to Dr. Biggs for supporting systemic improvements to the special education program at AUSD. You have all received invitations, but not everyone who might be watching has, so I'll repeat some of the events that we have planned to celebrate Special Education Awareness Month. Tomorrow, September 28th, we have the AUSD Board of Education Candidate Forum. I assume that those of you who are leaving would like to know who is going to replace you, and those of you who are staying would like to get a look at the people that you're going to be working with for at least the next 2 years. So I encourage you to attend. Then we have the family and staff get together, again a first, this Sunday, October the 2nd at 12 noon at the middle school. And then on Friday, October the 21st in the evening, we're going to host a film screening of the movie Crip Camp, A Disability Revolution by Nicole Newnham and Jim Lebrecht, followed immediately by a Q&A with our local disability rights activist, Ann Couple of Freeman, and film co-director Jim Lebrecht. And I'll see you Saturday on the track, and I hope you run.
I'm walking, but please send me those dates so I can put some of them in my Friday update to the community.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank Thank you. My name is Linda Bishop, and I'm a teacher at Marin School. And I really appreciate you having an in-person meeting. It's great to be here. I want to kind of give you some feedback on what I'm noticing on the ground. In my classroom, we talk a lot about what we want to do and what our priorities are here in AUSD. And I just want to give you a perspective from what I'm seeing rolling out. And there's a lot of great things that are happening, but there's some not so great things, and I want to speak them out loud. So I want you to know that the second grade and fifth grade across the district are impacted. They are packed full. These classrooms are fuller than they were pre-COVID. And I remember hearing at these board meetings that we were really going to try to address the needs of our students. And one of the main ways to do that was reducing class size. That didn't happen in second and fifth grade. We knew before the start of the school year that they were overfull, and we kept them that way. And the result is that everybody gets a little bit less. I don't think that's what we talked about at our board meetings, but that's what happens when you overfill classrooms. Also this year at Marin, our intervention program has been cut by 0.6 personnel. Intervention is our ESL teacher, our math intervention teacher, and our reading intervention teacher. I've learned that intervention is tied to enrollment, and when your enrollment is down, your funding is reduced. Albany chose to stick at that minimum level of funding and thereby cutting our intervention program. So we have less time available for kids. So our EL teachers pushing over, our reading intervention teachers pushing over, trying to meet the needs of these students who need a little bit more. But we have less. I don't think that that's what we talked about these meetings, of giving our students a little bit less. We tried to do a little bit more. We know that they suffered during COVID, especially our youngest learners, and we know that the best way to serve students is to catch them early, intervene early. But we're not doing that right now, and I think that that's a shame. It's disappointing to me. It's not what I expected. I also found out that we hired a whole 1.0 FTE teaching position, but it's a math coach. They're not even serving students. They're teaching teachers. And you would think, ooh, we got something new. We got something great, right? We've had this curriculum for 6 years, so there must be some kind of new techniques. No, there's no plan. There's nothing new. There's just a new position, but we don't have any new research-based, evidence-based kind of program that we're going to teach our teachers to support our students. We have a job. We made that. We found funding for that. We prioritized that, but we don't have a plan, and it's disappointing to me. And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that we would fund a position that's not serving students at all, that we create a service that would be for teachers, but we don't have a plan for them. So you kind of set the TSA up. You're not going to support the students, and we chose not to give anything to the students. I didn't expect that. I'm not trying to complain, but I think we do need to talk about the things that aren't working also. So I wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If you want to talk, you have to have your mic on.
Oh, I do want to give clarification, because sometimes when we come to the podium, you hear a narrative. Sometimes it doesn't give the full picture and clarification. One of the things I talked about when I got here is that we want to engage in real equity work. And what that means is that everybody don't get the same thing, and they get it based on needs. And at Marin, their needs were not as great as Ocean View. So we had to do some adjustments. We didn't make any cuts. We made some adjustments with money, and we serviced kids based on their needs, and the greatest needs were other places outside of Marin. And so that's what you see, the adjustment, when you start seeing the equity work. In terms of our classroom sizes, we just went through negotiations, and we spent a lot of time talking about that. And what we found out that we had the lowest class sizes in Alameda County, only behind Berkeley, and they have a special deal going on over there. And I say that because I want the narrative to be fully viewed. And so when you get engaged in equity work, that's what happens. You make some adjustments based on our kids' needs. So we didn't make any cuts financially. We just made some adjustment, again, based on kids' needs.
So just as a reminder, board members are not able to comment on comments during open public comment. As I know you know, you've been to board meetings before, but appreciate all of our public comment, and certainly we can direct staff to get data on issues that are brought up during public comment. So thank you. I was supposed to give that caveat before it starts, but today's a new day. All right, I don't see any hands up on Zoom. Am I right? Looking at it right?
No hands up in Zoom.
So that concludes our public comment on matters not on the agenda. We now move to our staff report for this evening, which is a discussion of the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress results from the past year and the year before the pandemic. And I'll hand it to you to introduce your staff.
Thank you. Before I introduce our Director of Professional Development and Assessment, I wanted to take a moment to give you a word of advice or caution that the data you're about to see, and you've already seen it over the weekend, is a mixed baggage. And it was anticipated to be so with the interruption of the learning over the last 2.5 years. And so what the state and other experts in the field of assessment, including myself, we call this our new benchmark and where we start from. And so tonight I'm going to introduce to you for the first time our Director of Professional Development and Assessment, Michelle Sinclair.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. It's my pleasure. So what I'm here to talk about tonight is the results of our state testing, which is otherwise known as CASP, or CAASPP. CASP testing was done for the first time this spring in 3 years, and I'll explain a little bit about the history of it. I wanted to let you know some updates about it. Student scores were released late summer, so families all received student scores. The aggregate data was released preliminarily or in a preview form. So we were allowed to see that, and we're allowed to share our public information, our individual district information publicly, but we are not allowed to share statewide results. So we don't have that comparison. We were actually given the data in what's called the SERS system. It's the California Education Reporting System, and that's where I pulled all the data from. So I was able, they don't offer all the aggregate data there, but I'll show you what I was able to pull. I wanted to also say that one way we can compare is that there is another assessment that's done, and it's called familiarly the National Report Card. Student report card, and it's the National Assessment of Education Progress. And those are long-term trend tests. They're given every 2 years. And this past winter, the students scored an average of 5 points lower in reading and 7 points lower in math when compared to 9-year-olds who took the same federal exam in 2020, just before the pandemic. So that gives us some kind of marker. Since we can't review the statewide results or review the statewide results. Okay, do we have that? Okay. Slide. So what we're going to review tonight is whole district data. We're going to review subgroups, and then broken down elementary, middle, and high school, and then into cohort groups, and then we're going to compare SBA or CASP to FastBridge data. Slide. Okay, I think it's important to talk about what assessments are and the different levels of assessments. First, there's the formative assessment, and that's what teachers use daily to guide their practice. So they're consistently giving spelling tests, quizzes, unit tests, what's called exit tickets, hold up your whiteboard. Those are methods of assessment that are done daily, and they're very important for moving forward in what to teach each day. The next level of testing is interim tests, and those tell us how the student is progressing throughout the year. And the goal is the end of year goals, which are usually the state standards. And those are things like district benchmarks, FastBridge is one of them, writing assessments, midterms, sometimes finals. And then, and DBAs, those are called district benchmark assessments, we give those. And then the last category is summative assessments, and that's what we're talking about tonight. Those tell us what the student has learned at the end of the year, and that's like CASP or LPAC summative. Slide. Okay, so the CASP system, the acronyms can get very confusing, so I'm going to kind of break those down. There's a CASP system, and the CASP system has 3 sections. the CAST, which is the science version of the test, and that's administered to all 5th graders, all 8th graders, and once in high school. There's an alternative for each of these tests. The CAA is, we have one for science, and that is geared towards students who have individual education plans that indicate they should take the alternative assessment. And then for English language arts and math, we have what's called the SBA. And you might hear the acronym SBAC, but that's actually the consortium that created the assessment. So it's the SBA, the Smarter Balance Assessment, and that is given to all students 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8th, and then 11th. And again, that's in English and English language arts and math. And then there's a CAA for the SBA, an alternative assessment for the SBA as well, which is indicated through an IEP. And then there's a Spanish version, which we don't do in Albany, but that's for Spanish-speaking students and if you have a TWI or a bilingual program. Next slide. Okay, the Casp Timeline. So in the old days, we took a test called STAR, and a lot of times that was given in a written form. We passed out the papers, bubble in the little bubbles. And in 2014, we switched over to the Casp system and piloted it 1 year, and then it went into full force after that until the pandemic hit. So in 2019-20, spring of 20 was when the assessment was supposed to be given, and it was put to a halt because of the pandemic, and it was not given that year. The following year, 2021, the test was optional, and you could substitute it if you had a standards-based local assessment. We put FastBridge in for that, so we were able to use our FastBridge data for that. And then this past year, 21-22, it's the first time that we've taken it again for 3 years. Slide. So it's really important that we remember that there are multiple measures for measuring student achievement. They're a starting point for discussions, and it's important that we look at various kinds of assessments, and we have a comprehensive understanding of how well and under what pedagogies our students learn. And we also look at multiple indicators and sources of student learning of varying kinds gathered at multiple points in time and within and across all subject areas. Slide. Okay, so the first section is on comparing 2018 to 21-22. So again, the assessments are administered in the spring. So we're talking about spring of 2019 compared to spring of 2022. This is not the same cohort, obviously, but it is comparing the same grade levels. Slide. So this is in English language arts, and how the test is broken down is by MET. Well, it's exceeded standard, met standard, nearly met standard, and did not meet standard. So 4 categories. The state would normally combine met or exceeded standard together. And so that's how we're measuring our data tonight. So we looked at in 2018-19, this is all students who tested. So it would be 3rd through 8th grade and 11th graders. We met or exceeded the standard by 79.1%. And then this year, we met or exceeded the standard at 76.7%. So it was a slight decrease of 2.4%. Slide. Broken down in subgroups, we have white students who had no change. We had our Latino population who had a decrease of 3.4%. And then our Black or African American students had an increase of 0.6%. That's for English language arts. Slide. Okay. I think we skipped a slide. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. You were right. There's more subgroups. So our 2 or more races had a decrease of 1.6, and our Asian population had a decrease of 2.1%. Next slide. Okay, in math, in 2018-19, we had between the 3 years, we had a decrease of 4.1%. Slide. For all students. Broken down into subgroups, our white students had an increase of 0.4%. Our Latino students had a decrease of 4.4%. And our Black or African American students had a decrease of 16.2%. Two or more races had a decrease of 3.3%, and our Asian population had a decrease of 5.1%. Slide. Okay, so I looked at that and I thought I want to break down the Black African American data a little bit more. So as alarming as it was, I thought, is this just a high school, upper grade problem or a lower grade problem? So I broke it down by elementary and secondary. And you can see in the elementary grades, the met or exceeded percentage fell by 18.8%. And our secondary students, 6th through 8th and 11th grade, fell by 12.6%. Slide. So you see on here, there's preliminary data. This is our students with disabilities, because this was not provided in the SIRS report. So I pulled it from the preview data or preliminary data. And that just comes with a caution, because the aggregate data is accurate. They're just verifying numbers of students tested. So it is allowable to be shared. So we had an actual increase in English language arts for our students with disabilities. And in math, we had an increase of 2% for our students with disabilities. Slide. Our English language learners, we had an increase in English language arts of 4.4% and a decrease of 1.4% in math. This was all students. Slide. Again, socioeconomically disadvantaged was not included in the SIRS report, so it was pulled from preview data. And for our low socioeconomic students, we had a very slight increase of 0.1% in ELA and a slight decrease of 0.6 in math. Slide. So now I broke it down into elementary, middle, and high school. Slide. So elementary would be 3rd through 5th grade, and I need to pull it up a little bit. I can't see it. Okay, there we go. We had 75.5 met or exceeded. In middle school, we had, this is English language arts, 75.3% met or exceeded, and in high school, 79.7% met or exceeded in English language arts. Slide. In math, we had 71% met or exceeded, 65.7 in middle school, and 71.7 in high school. Slide. So now the next part, I looked at cohorts. So I thought, okay, let's look at 3rd grade. They took the assessment in 3rd grade, waited 3 years, and then took it again in 6th grade. And then same with 8th to 11th. Slide. So for English language arts, this is looking a little bit different now. We're looking horizontally across, and we're seeing that the 3rd grade scored 8 points, 8 percentage points below standard. From 2018-19 to 21-22, decreased by 8.3% for ELA. And then for math, they decreased by 10.2%. Next slide. This is the 8th grade to 11th grade group. They, from 19 to 22, increased 4.2% in English language arts, and in math, a very slight increase by 0.2%. Slide. Then I thought, I wonder what SBA looks like in comparison to FastBridge. So I pulled some of that data. Slide. It wasn't apples to apples comparison, but it's pretty similar if you kind of look at it in a different way. So for English language arts, I showed these statistics before, 76.5% for our 3rd through 5th graders this last spring. And then in FastBridge, we had 75.7% were low risk or advanced. So that's kind of the equivalent of that. So very aligned. Slide. Then in math, I used 2 of the FastBridge assessments because it was a little bit hard to separate these out. But we had for math in this last spring, for elementary, 71.9% met or exceeded. And then in FastBridge, it had very high numbers in A math. So then I thought, well, I'm going to look at the CBM math, which is another math assessment they take in FastBridge, and that seemed to be a little more aligned. Next slide. This is 6th through 8th grade with a comparison. So SBA, again, 75.3% met or exceeded. And then in FastBridge, we had 87.4% low risk or advanced. So showing a little higher on FastBridge. Next slide. So math, for these scores, we're looking at math at 6th to 8th grade. We had 65.7% in math that are exceeded. And then in using the A math in middle school, we had 66.3%, so more aligned, and then 72.2% using the CBM math. Slide. Okay, so this surfaces a lot of information, and so I just want to kind of recap some of the challenges that surfaced from this. We can see that all students in ELA from spring 19 to spring 22 fell by 2.4%. Okay. All students in math compared fell by 4.1 percentage points. Scores for certain subgroups fell more than the district average, and for some, a lot more than the district average. So Black African American scores in math fell by 16.2%. The district fall was 4.1. Black African American scores in math fell more in elementary than they did in secondary. For Asian schools, scores in math fell also by 5.1%. For our Latino students, scores fell by 4.6% compared to the district 4.1. And scores in ELA for our Latino students fell by 3.4, more than the district average, 2.4. For our cohort data, I thought that was really fascinating that our 3rd through 6th grade, 3rd to 6th grade students seemed to take a bigger hit, and the scores fell by 8.3% over the 3-year span. And then that's in ELA, and in math fell by 10.2%. And I don't want to leave you on such a grim note, so the next slide. The successes. Students with disabilities, the scores increased, both in ELA and in math, and our English learner students' scores increased too in ELA, which was great news. For our Black African American students, the scores in English language arts did increase, very, very slight amount, but definitely better than the district average. And then the cohorts, 8th grade to 11th grade, did well. They increased 4.4 over the 3-year span in English language arts and 2% in math. And so that, I believe, concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to say that we're looking at our scores in isolation, and I think at some point we need to come back and look at how we compare to the overall state, the county, and our neighbors. Right now with our neighbors, although we had a dip in areas, we still are remain the highest in the area, but you see there's lots of room for growth. And I wanted to highlight one piece, that this is our new benchmark, and we got a lot of work to do.
Thank you. Board, comments, questions? Go ahead.
Okay.
Trustee Dana.
I just had a quick logistical question. You had the comparisons with the FastBridge up until the 6th through 8th. Was there a reason why the 11th grade data wasn't included?
Yeah, for some reason, I couldn't pull that data yet, so I can come back with that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Trustee Doss.
Thank you. And I appreciate the presentation. And I could tell as you were presenting it that some of the information was hard to present. I could see how much you cared in your presentation. So I appreciate that and appreciate the information. So I kind of just have some questions for clarification, and then I wanted to kind of take a deep dive into the percentages. Clarification, is there a time when we can see that state?
Yeah, they'll release it publicly on the dashboard, and they're saying that should happen within about a month. There's just a most recent article, Dr. Wells, you sent out, that said they were going to release it a little quicker than they had anticipated.
And then
I think sometime in October, but I'm not sure.
And then when that happens, will you somehow communicate that with us, or?
Sure. It's at that point, I don't know if you've used the dashboard before, but the public can go on and can put in different subgroups, can put in different schools, different all throughout California.
And then can you give an example of a district benchmark assessment?
Yeah, we developed years ago a math district benchmark assessment. So that's based on the curriculum that you're teaching. And it has, it's for where you would want your students to be at certain times in the year. And teachers use that and they collaborate together around those assessments to do planning.
And then do teachers determine that benchmark amongst like each department, or is it like approved at the district level, or how does that?
No, it's based on the pacing of the curriculum or the standards.
And then another clarification question. Why don't we do the Spanish assessment in Albany?
Because we don't teach Spanish. It's for programs like in Berkeley, they have the TWI program where they teach in Spanish and then they assess kids in Spanish.
Thank you. And so now I kind of wanted to talk about the percentages a little bit. You talked about the 16% in math. Well, first, so 16%, how many students is that roughly?
So in the, I can tell you in the subgroup of, are you talking about Black African American group?
Yes.
Okay, so the 3rd through 8th and 11th grade, we had a student, I got the numbers here, 58 students were tested. So they're not large number sizes. That's something to know.
Okay, so the total number tested was 58.
Yeah, that's 3rd through 8th and 11th, okay? And then if you broke that down like I did for elementary and middle, then, elementary and secondary. So secondary would include 6th through 8th and 11th. And those were 28 students, and all elementary were 30 students. So again, low numbers.
All right, and then, so it's 16% of the 58? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that is a really small number of students. So I guess my question is, because that's such a small number of students, kind of going back with what Dr. Wells said, looking at other districts, our surrounding areas have way more students. And I would think that kind of having a very distinct approach, like per student, would be really difficult when you have 800 black students versus 58, right? So I guess my question is, because there's such a small number, and that's a different problem for a different day, because it shouldn't be such a small number, it should be a bigger number, but that's a different discussion for a different time. But since we do have such a small number, and it's 16% of that small number, like 16% of 58 is a really small number, what do you think is a roadblock, or what's preventing us from being very intentional and specific with this very small group of students to move them out from the red into the green?
Well, that's a very big question. And I think it's very, very nuanced. I mean, we can look at the tier 1. We can look at how are students feeling in class? How do students feel like they're part of the learning environment? When we go to tier 2, are we providing the right supports? Are we identifying the right supports and then providing the right supports? Are we consistently looking at data and seeing, is there growth? I think there's, I could go on and on all day, but I think that there's definitely a lot we can do as a district, and especially with a small group like that.
Can I ask maybe a follow-up question, because I know we are going to get a presentation in 2 weeks on MTSS and UDL and all of those strategies and how we're using those. But one question that maybe would get at what you're asking is, the teachers have had these results, right, since the spring of, did they get them at the same time? I know parents got them last spring. Does that mean that teachers had this information going into the fall so that they were able to identify students that were not meeting the standard when they came into the class this fall? And then how are we using that data already?
The data was released to families, but it was not released to teachers. Did not receive it, let me put it that way. But I did this presentation for teachers previously, and we also looked in I did a training on how to use FastBridge and how to look for growth, which was a really fascinating conversation. And so we are working on that. But they did not get that at the end of the school year. This year, the release of data was really slow. The last time we took SBAC, I was able, as a principal in my other district, to look at it right away. And this year, they didn't offer that up for us. It was a little bit different.
Interesting. So parents could see their kids' scores, but teachers aren't able to see, for example, here's a child. Let's say we have one of these kids that's in the 3rd to 6th grade in that age group. A teacher didn't have access to be able to look and say, here's a child that was exceeding the standard 3 years ago and is now.
They did once school started, so it was the information was put into ARIES, our SIS system, and so they were able to view it there if you went in and looked at it.
Okay, great. So maybe one thing, sorry, I know you were asking, maybe one thing we could ask as a follow-up is just how staff use this data to inform, identifying students that have fallen, that either are behind or have fallen behind, and what kinds of services might be needed or additional attention. Yeah. I didn't realize that parents had the scores so far before teachers. Yeah,
we do use FastBridge data, however. We pull that and we look at it right away as soon as school starts and before school starts. And we start building groups based on that data.
Great. And then can I just clarify the 16% thing? So it's not only 16% of African American students, right? There was a drop of 16%, but that drop meant that we went from 43% meeting or exceeding the standard of African American students to 27%. So it's only 27% of that 58 are meeting the standard. It's not just 16% that are behind, it's that we dropped 16%. So it's a lot of kids, it's alarming. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Yeah, so thank you, and I appreciate the follow-up question, because this is the discussion, that we want to have, so we can really kind of, tackle these issues, right? And so, even with that clarification, we're thinking about a number of students. I just want everybody here who's going to listen in to think about it for a moment. That we have these number of students that are in this district. They get up every day and they grab their backpack, they load up, and they come to school ready to learn. And they come each day, 5 days a week, ready to learn. And we send them home, and they don't have the tools necessary to complete these assessments. And it's been something that is consistently happening. And I don't mean to hamper on it, but the reason why I'm saying it like this, and the reason why I want to like kind of take a moment for everybody to like take a deep breath and really close your eyes if you need to, and just think that if you had a student, if it was your student, if it was your child that you were sending to school every day, and they were coming home every day, and they weren't meeting or exceeding the standards necessary to be a successful member of society, how frustrated you would be. And think about how frustrating that would be if, when it was talked about, when it was discussed, people responded with, well, it's happening statewide. Well, it's happening at a national level. All students who look like your student are struggling with this in one way or another. It's a really, really tough thing to kind of deal with. And the reason why I'm talking about it, and the reason why I continue to talk about it, is because we're talking about students who, I can't really put my finger on it, because I know that everybody is as frustrated and upset about it as I am. I know that it bothers everybody as much as it bothers me, because I don't think that anybody would be here if that wasn't the case, right? Because we just talked about how teachers are underpaid and overworked. And so we know that they are here because they care about students. I think that there is an opportunity, I think that Albany has a unique opportunity, because we are a small district. There's not a lot of students, but it's interesting, right? So there's not a lot of students, but in terms of students not meeting and exceeding, it's a lot. Because if it's one or it's two, that's a lot, right? So these numbers, you know, it's a lot, but it's not an overwhelming amount, because it is a small district, so it puts us a unique opportunity to be very intense about how we help these students specifically. We could literally reach out to every student, and it wouldn't even take a whole day, because it's a small, you know, like everybody could make 10 phone calls and we would reach every single family. And then we could have, or we could create a task force, and the task force could specifically reach out to every family to figure out, this is why we're here, this is where you need to be, and this is how we're gonna get you there. And maybe we don't figure it out today or tomorrow, but at least those families know we're not gonna just let this happen because it's happening everywhere else. And we're not gonna just let this happen because we can't figure it out. I'm literally sitting in a room right now full of doctors. Not doctors of medicine, not dentists. There's one doctor of law here. Literally doctors of education. We got to put our heads together and help these specific families. We can't keep just reporting this information and letting these students fail. We can't just keep putting it on the board and talking about it and just letting it pass on because 79% of the students are doing great. We have to keep hounding on this, but it's such a small number, we should be able to contact each family and figure out why it's happening and fix it. And I'm really kind of calling it out, because if we don't, it'll just be business as usual. And that is really frustrating, because when I wake up in the morning and I go to the school, I see these students. I have to look at them, and I see their parents dropping them off. And it's really frustrating. And I feel like I'm failing them. Why am I here? Like, what is the real plan? Not the politically correct plan, not the all Brian's mean and he says mean stuff and nobody likes him. Well, what's the real plan for these students? Because I don't know, I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, I am tired of going and looking at these students and seeing their parents and having conversations with their parents and not being able to give them real answers as to why we're failing their students every single day. And so we have to have a real plan. We can't just keep skating around the issue and pretending like we have plans and pretending like we're doing something, and then these reports are still the same. And these students are still failing. But our percentages are high. They're higher than Richmond. They're higher than Oakland. So what? Our kids don't go to school in Richmond, and they don't go to school in Oakland. They're right here in Albany, where we have a black superintendent, 2 black board members. They're right here. They're not in the other cities. And I'm not like calling anybody out or putting anybody down. That's not my goal with this. My goal is to light a fire under all of us to fix this. And to fix it now and not later, because these students, they can't wait for later. Even if we fix it in 10 years, that doesn't help the students right now, because those 10-year-old kids will be 20 years old. And it'll be too late for them. Too late for them to figure out what's happening on their paycheck because we didn't give them the tools that they needed in math. Too late for them to figure out how to fill out the job application in the first place because they can't read it because we didn't give them the tools that they needed in English. And then when they're struggling in class and they act out, then we blame them. But maybe it's because they don't understand what's going on because nobody cares. Or maybe everybody cares, but they don't know everybody cares because it's the same thing every time, over and over and over, the same stuff. It's the same responses, the same data, the same solutions. But the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We can't expect for things to change for these students if we continue doing the same things over and over and over. We gotta switch it up. We have to change it. And this is not meant to put anybody down. This is meant to say, let's put our heads together and figure it out. Absolutely.
Right. She has her hand up. Trustee Duran, Vice President Duran. You got to put your...
Ms. Sinclair, do you have a flashy title that I should use, like Executive Director of Professional Development?
Director will do. Just Director.
Oh, Director. Okay, Director Sinclair. I do share much of what Brian said in terms of the frustration and not seeing change over the 4 years that I've been on the board. The statistics sort of average out, you know, even though we've been in a pandemic and they've dropped a few points, but in general, over the 4 years, I really haven't seen much of a change. And I tend not to look at pluses of Albany and the students that are scoring well because I have that expectation automatically in this type of community. I think you and I have discussed that before. But I look at the students that are not meeting the standards, which means they're not at grade level, essentially. And those are the students that concern me so much. And our numbers, our percentages do not look good. And I want to take it a step further because you're new to this position, and I don't think you've been part of this conversation before. But in the future, in terms of future presentations, if in addition to the percentages, if you would be able to have the percentage of the students that haven't made it. Because those are the students that we should be focusing in on. Yes, we can celebrate the success and acknowledge that, but the focus truly needs to be on those students that need our intentional support. And so if, once again in the future, if you can do 2 things in that regard. One is always have those percentages of the students that are below the standards, not meeting the standards, and also the number of those students. I try to figure it out, and I'm not that great a mathematician, but say for the Latinos, for the number of Latinos, because they're a sizable block of students. There's approximately 610 Latino students in this district as of October of last year, of 2021 rather. And I estimated that for grades 3 through 8 and 11, the number of Latinos that did not meet the standards for language arts were essentially 118 students.
Yeah, I have the students tested number, I have 298.
How many?
298, because it's just 3rd through 8th and then 11th.
You got 298 students that are below the standards?
Who took the SBA.
298 Latino students.
Who took the SBA.
Who took the exam? Okay, and I have 118 that didn't make it, that did not pass, okay? And that was for language arts. And for the students in math, I believe it was approximately, I had something like 130 some students, 38 students, Latinos, that were below grade level.
Yeah,
To
about
me,
120.
yeah. Oh, okay. So to me, when you think of those warm bodies, when you think of 138 kids, that's a lot of students. And that's what we need to focus on, those students that are not making it. And what do we do different? Because, yeah, and we've been through a pandemic, and we need to turn this place sort of upside down in looking for solutions. You know, we know that education goes in cycles, right? And what's new today is going to be old tomorrow, et cetera. But truly, have you had an opportunity yet to meet with teachers specifically around these results and say, how can we do things different? I heard you actually refer to MTSS and the kinds of questions at what levels, you know, level 1 for this group of kids, and then if they don't make it, then what do we do level 2? So I guess I'm asking you, have you had those conversations with teachers yet about what are we doing different this school year to address these students? We've had fast track since last year. Fast bridge. We've had fast bridge since last year. Once again, what are we doing different? And I don't know, you haven't been in the position that long, but have you had some conversations?
Well, I did do a meeting with elementary teachers, all elementary teachers, and we looked at the data, and we talked about it, and we talked about what we saw, and then we talked about breaking it down. And I can't break it down more for our subgroups because the numbers get too low, but we are breaking it down in our schools, and that's where we can individually target needs. And I think it's really important. We're trying to develop cost teams. Cost teams are groups of people who get together and say, like, what is it truly that's why is the student not mastering standards, et cetera. So we are doing that work. I started it last year, and I'm hoping that we can build this. To me, the systems are really important so that students are not falling through the cracks. You have a system in place that you utilize regularly. So that's where I want to go next. But yeah, we just starting.
Do you anticipate focusing on elementary in the sense that if we can catch the kids as early as possible, there is a possibility of equalizing the playing field so that when we get to high school, we're not having this old conversation about the students that aren't making it and they're leaving us?
Yeah, it's very concerning, the drop-off since COVID, because I feel like the data wasn't so great prior to COVID, and now it's worse. So that's something where we all have to kind of look at that and say, I agree, what can we do different? And so some of the things we're looking at is, for example, math fluency. So we're trying to target 4th and 5th graders so that when they go on to middle school, we want them to have their math fluency down. So That's one area we're looking at. There's multiple areas to look at, clearly, but today I was with a principal, and we were trying to break down the data so we could look at, is it number sense? Is it, with the older kids, is it fractions? We're just trying to break down where we're seeing the biggest gaps.
And I just want to remind the board that we have a sequence order. Today was to look at the data. Next board meeting, we're going to be presenting how we're responding to this data. I really appreciate the board grappling and raising real issues and not running away from it, because it's not data that we should be proud of, but more importantly is what are we doing about it, and how are we addressing our kids, and how are we changing the data, not 10 years from now, not 5 years from now, but in the immediate future, the right now. And so I'm excited about our presentation at the next board meeting on how we're responding to this data. It's important for us to present that to the board and the community.
And my last question is, do you take into consideration the fact that students are now taking these exams, these assessments on the computer, and there may be kids, the students that, get nervous around especially if it's an exam time? I mean, is there any consideration to that at all at either the state level or our level?
The state did change the testing a little bit to not make it as long. It was very laborious for years, and they have shortened it a little bit. But yeah, that's a factor. I see students kind of check out when they're taking those state assessments. Not everybody, and it's hard to measure that.
Yeah, Trustee Davidson.
Can we look at slide 10 and 11 just really quickly? So I'm just trying to process this all.
Yeah.
Okay, so on this one, it says that we saw just a 4.1% decrease across all of our students.
All students. Mm-hmm.
All students.
And that's 1748 is the number for that.
See, I love when we have those real numbers in there.
Yeah, I'm happy to share them. I just didn't want to give you too much on a data slide.
I think that in some of our last presentations, we'd asked to have that on all, so it's really, for me, for this whole conversation, it puts it in real student terms. I guess I'm just confused how, if we're seeing these huge drops based on the ethnicity, and I'm not seeing any real gains, how we're only at a 4.4% loss or a 4.1% loss district-wide. And I understand that might be because those subgroups are just so small. But a 0.4% increase in our white students can make up for such large decreases among all other ethnicities.
Yeah, well, if you look at our Asian population, we had 500 students tested. And for our white population, we had 471. So that's a majority of the scores. And if you, even that out mathematically, it would make sense. And 2 or more race was 265 students.
Okay, I guess just having the numbers would be helpful. So
Yeah.
one other thing, I'm gonna go do that math later. These were not loading super quickly for me when I was reading through it at home, so I apologize. One more thing, I was really expecting to see that math, the Black and African American math scores more dramatically decreasing in our secondary levels than in our elementary levels. So I'm wondering if there's been any conversation around what might have contributed to that, or if there were measures in place that bolstered those older students.
I think that also, if you look at the elementary to the cohort that was elementary 3rd grade to 6th grade, you saw a much bigger drop-off than 8th to 11th. To me, my interpretation of that is that the pandemic hit younger students harder, and that's what I saw in our schools, particularly at like the 2nd grade and 3rd grade level. I think it affected kids differently. That's my guess.
So we weren't doing anything to support those older students a little bit with more targeted resources or anything?
Thank you for that. At the high school, we built in support classes during the day for kids who are struggling, more specifically our students of color and historically disenfranchised students. And we did that during the day because we know historically kids who are struggling, you don't get them after school. you don't get them before school. So we have to take advantage of them while they're at school. And so we created classes, support classes that give kids more time and support. And we're starting to see dividends there. And we're evolving and getting even more strategic with our MTSS that you hear more about in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, Trustee Boyd.
Thank you. And thank you, Director Sinclair, for this presentation. It's difficult to put a bunch of things up on the board that are going to be so depressing to see in large part, although it's extremely important for us to have as clear of data as we possibly can, as we've all discussed before. So thank you for the analysis and for presenting it so clearly. I won't speak long because we've already talked about the things that I'm going to say. It's kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of things that have already been said, so I won't talk long. But I'll just say that when we're looking at the drops in performance, it's important to keep in mind what I think President Hinckley was getting at before, which is when we're already talking about populations that are underperforming to begin with, and then we're talking about a drop. It's not the same as looking at, it's important to recognize drops in performance among all of our students and the way that the pandemic impacted almost all of our students, but or impacted them all, the way it impacted test scores for almost all of our students. But we have to have a particular focus when we're talking about populations that were already underperforming, and then we're looking at drops anyway. And then if those drops are larger than for other groups, then it's compounded. And so I appreciate Dr. Wells pointing out that we're going to be, this is kind of a part one, this is where we are, and we're going to be looking in the next board meeting or future board meetings about what we're doing. I just want to make sure that when we're doing that, there is a focus, as I believe Trustee Doss was talking about, to look at what we're doing now that we weren't doing before. We've talked before about tutoring programs, et cetera, that are available, that are perhaps being underutilized, and we kind of wonder about, well, is it because they're after school and students can't stay after school? Is it because of this or that? When Trustee Doss talked about the importance of us reaching out to all families, I would hope that we're already doing that for all families that their students are not able to perform at the levels that we would hope that they can. And if we're not already doing that, I'd like to understand why we're not. And if it's because we don't have the resources to be able to do that, then I'd like it to be said here that we don't have the resources that are necessary to be able to individually reach out to every family that is underperforming and find out how we can better support them, because it's not enough to make resources available if those resources do not fit the needs of our families and our students. And I just want to encourage us as we talk about equity and equity policies and statements and moving in the direction of having an equity focus, as Vice President Durand was saying, that we're not looking at only the percentages of students that are performing well and being happy with ourselves only because we have large percentages of students that are performing very well. There are students who can go home and teach themselves the course themselves. Like there are students who are able to perform at very high levels with very little kind of touching from, they don't need the same resources that other students need. And so we, of course, want to celebrate our students who perform at these high levels, our teachers who support students performing at those high levels, but we need to focus on the students who are not able to perform at those levels, and we need to judge ourselves as a district based on how those students are doing, not based on how the students who have always performed at high levels continue to perform at high levels. We need to look at what we're doing to change things that are wrong to begin with. And the fact that they are wrong in all other places means that we're not doing anything distinctly bad, but maybe we can do something distinctly magnificent by being better than what else is happening in the country or in the state. As Trustee Doss was referring to, the fact that they're happening in all these other places doesn't do much as far as what our responsibility is to our families. So I very much look forward to hearing how we are going to, in new ways, address these numbers that we have been looking at forever, and what we can do to chip away at them here in Albany, even if they're not getting chipped away at in other places, what we can do here in a targeted way where we're getting specific feedback from our families to understand what they in particular need and how we can address their particular needs. Thank you.
I wanted to know what was done between the math workshop that was held in March and now to mitigate all the disparities that we're seeing in the math results.
I'm going to let somebody.
Yeah, that was before your arrival. Dr. Shin was here at that time, and I don't know if she heard the question, but one of the things that we, in terms of the high school math, one of the things that we took some qualitative data about what's going on in math and what's not going on in math. And one of the conclusions, and we want to talk about that when we come back, but I'll share a piece of it. One of the conclusions is that we have to tighten up what we call our Tier 1 instruction, meaning that how do we make sure that our students in math classes, for example, our support math classes, have the top skilled person in there providing for our most needy kids instruction. And we want to look at we want to look at a different paradigm, making learning, demystifying learning. For example, learning shouldn't be a mystery in terms of what is expected and being able to, what you should expect and what kids should be able to do on any exam that need to be spelled out. And so our response was to have a math coach, trainer, who will be working with teachers in the math department in those lower maths where our students have struggled to make sure they're providing A+ instruction, because we learn through instruction you have significant academic achievements. And so that's what we're doing is increasing the quality of instruction by having a math coach this year, unlike ever before, to work with the teachers in that area.
Any other questions from the board? Yeah, Trustee Davidson.
Well, I guess at a future meeting, I'd like more information about this math coach and how that's playing out, since now we're going to use that to target this data. So I'd love to see sort of the plan around that.
So originally, when we planned this meeting, we were going to have the discussion of UDL and MTSS and everything at the same meeting, with the intention of being able to move seamlessly into a discussion of what we're going to do about this. It wasn't possible to do it, as it turns out, at the same time. But I do think we could just, if there are other things that people want to make sure they hear or see in that presentation, now might be a good time to talk about them. So while you're maybe thinking of that, I'm hearing for sure we want to hear some follow-up specifically on how we're thinking not just about strategies that we've decided are the best sort of research-supported strategies for all students, but how we're really thinking about targeting specific students, how we use data to, as individual teachers, as site leaders, as district leaders, to identify students and groups of students, to target interventions, to, I think we all would like to hear not just what these tools are in the abstract, but in how we're really dealing with specific students, and so that we can really understand how we're using information to support the students, as many people have emphasized that we really are not educating as well as we need to be, right? I would say just a couple of thoughts about this data presentation while we think about what else we want to see in part two. One is that, so we've talked a lot about the math scores of African American students, but I also don't want to get lost in here that this is sort of organized around what happened to groups between those two time periods, but I want to make sure we're also drawing out, as Trustee Boyd said, that we went into this with significant gaps between groups. Mm-hmm. So for example, our African American students actually did better in math in 21-22 than they did in 2018-19, and then we sort of moved on. But the reality is that fewer than half of them met the standard before or after the pandemic. So we're still failing 60% of those students. So I don't want that to get lost just because they sort of held their ground over that time period. So maybe one follow-up, and I know this data ultimately we'll be able to slice it ourselves online, but I do think a presentation that, and maybe for the next meeting, that sort of draws that through line of the achievement gap itself as a picture, as the way that we sort of organize how we think about this. Because if we are thinking of this as a benchmark year, then there's a lot of disturbing gaps baked into that benchmark. And the overall outcome of this time period, with some minor caveats, is that our achievement gap widened significantly. And that's, upsetting, even if many of us thought that's what would happen as we came out of the pandemic. But I really want to make sure that we have some way to organize this information so that it's really clear that even the groups that maybe held their ground are still groups that we really need to be focusing a lot on. I would, in addition to I guess you mentioned the math coach, for sure, the fact that we have an elementary school position that's created entirely to do math coaching, even if it's of teachers. I think I'd really like to hear how they're responding to this specific data. At some point, it would, I think, be useful to see all of the groups broken down by that the elementary versus secondary. You did it for African American students, but I think it would be useful to see that across the groups, just so that we can begin to understand where we really need to focus our attention. I think that's all I had for. Oh, one other comment was the SBA versus the FastBridge comparison. That was super useful. Are you going to sort of go back to, now that we have, we had SBAC or the SBA tests, then we had FastBridge, and this is the first time we've had both. So will you be going back and looking not just at the overall averages and comparing those, but at individual students, or some other way to really test whether FastBridge is an effective way for us to be measuring student learning?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting that some of the scores didn't match up so much, and some did. So keeping that in mind as we look at future data. But we just did FastBridge again, and that data I just started breaking apart now, so we'll be able to look at that too. But one thing that's kind of cool about FastBridge that we did in our last, that I did with teachers, was there's this way of breaking down the students in your class and how they performed from the beginning of last year to the end of last year. And it shows a growth percentage. And we were all very fascinated by that, because there's some students who remained on the needs improvement area, but had massive growth, had like a 98th percentile of growth, which was, I think it's a way of looking at it a little differently, and for looking at maybe that student received intervention and maybe that was effective. And so I'm hoping we can break it down more like that. One of the teachers had a question for me, like, can we look at this Reflex Math, which is a fluency program we use, can we look at that and see, like, compare a class and see if we're seeing better outcomes with that? So there's definitely a lot of thought and analysis coming along with this, but it's pretty new, the data's new, so.
Yeah, it's incredibly helpful, and I know we are having a FastBridge report maybe in October, November. I can't remember when it's scheduled for. So I think it's really helpful to keep these presentations sort of building on each other, so that we're learning as you are about what the data is telling us, and then continuing to hear how we're responding to it.
Yeah, and I'm always happy to take data requests if there's groups you want to look at, and I'll include the numbers.
Great. And I know the Student Achievement Committee also is doing information gathering, and may actually be the best body to be sort of generating those data requests too. Yeah, Vice President Duran.
For this updated presentation that we're going to be getting, I'm wondering if we need to also reach out to the teachers. I mean, you sort of represent them in a way, but I think we need to hear from teachers, and I'm not suggesting they come and spend all night here like we do, but rather, and so it could be written. I mean, it could be a survey. It could be something where teachers are able to give us insights. I mean, to ask them to reimagine, not to complain about, you know, what they don't have for whatever reason, but really, how can they reach these students that we're talking about? What are different ways? And they may know. I mean, I know there's teachers here that are reaching some of these students. We don't hear those stories, but there are teachers that are, you know, can give us more concrete ideas of what is possible and what support they need from the district in order to have this be across the board, and not just a few students in their classrooms, but in every classroom. So I'd like to hear something from them.
Let me just say that we do get teachers' input. Maybe we should share the input that we get with them, because they are included in terms of being an inclusive, collaborative approach. But I do want to highlight one piece that really resonated with me, and I got to say something that Trustee Doss said. We are very fortunate, and we are in a unique position to do something revolutionary and be a model to the state and the country. We're talking about 58 Black kids. And so that's going to be the charge for our staff, and as we look at equity work and where we need to start adjusting our focus. But having 58 kids and having them all be successful, meeting and exceeding, can be a blueprint for all kids. And so we're fortunate. This data is not a surprise to us. We predicted it with our FastBridge data. We also had some mitigating pieces in place where the drops could have been even larger, like some of our other districts. But that deal doesn't make it good. But the reality is we had a pandemic for 2.5 years. Learning was interrupted. We're not looking for excuses, but we're looking at the opportunities to make a difference. This is our benchmark, and we're excited about what the future is going to happen, but it's going to be a lot of work this year. My staff is up to the tasks.
Trustee Boyd.
I'm wondering, related to what Vice President Duran was just suggesting, if in the follow-up, it might be possible to split up some of the follow-up by, you know, elementary versus secondary, because the outreach that needs to be done is so different, and just to kind of avoid very long presentations where, you know, it just kind of keeps going and we lose track of what we're actually sort of focusing on. I would, at least I think it would be helpful for me to perhaps have an elementary schools, you know, report back about how we're attempting to target the students in particular who are not performing as well, and what sorts of initiatives have been started and what the progress is there, and then kind of going up.
Trustee Dana.
I'm just wondering if there's any way for teachers, I know that there's a report that parents can see like how their students are doing on these benchmark exams, and I'm just wondering if there's any way for teachers to see the specific concepts that students are having trouble with, because I know that especially for a subject like math, it's probably the most compounding subject where, you know, everything kind of builds on itself. And so if a lot of these students aren't getting certain concepts, and it's happened, they didn't get a concept maybe 2 years ago, it's really difficult to have them understand what's going on in the year that they're in, or in the grade that they're in. And so I'm just wondering if there's a way that teachers can sort of see that data, or that side of the data, to maybe like adjust.
Yeah, the SBA data is broken down into domains, but the domains are very broad, so it's hard to really pinpoint through those. But FastBridge does a little bit better of a job for that. So if you look at FastBridge, like for example, for the reading, you can look at phonemic awareness, or phonics, or fluency, or comprehension, and they break that down a little more in math too in FastBridge. So that's some of the work we need to.
Yeah, because I think that would be the like groundwork for that, just catching students back up.
Right, and then how do you respond, right?
Right, it needs to happen now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me respond to that, because I appreciate that. Trustee Allison Dana. One of the things we have to do is not do the same thing and expect different results. I'm quoting a board member here, but when we think about mathematics at the high school, we have to have the courageous to engage in evidence-based practices, and we have to include our students. And what that means is that when students take exams, they have to be able to get them back so they have something to study from so they can develop mastery. And that's a gross missed opportunity for so many of our kids. We didn't say this tonight, but as I dove into the data and started looking at other things about who's taking AP courses and who's not, who's being excluded, and it's a unspoken systemic way of exclusion that we have to start addressing and have the courage to address at our high schools and disrupt that kind of practice. It's much deeper than just the surface cursory kind of data. We're talking about some systemic exclusionary practices for disenfranchised groups that we have to address and tackle. And I'm on record for being the one to do that, because we can no longer stand by idly being in these influence positions and go along and get along at our kids' expense. So it's going to take a multi-tier approach and us putting everything on the table and being real honest and truthful and having our students a part of that process.
I appreciate that, and I recognize that as well. So thank you for saying that. And I'm excited for our next presentation around the MTSS stuff.
Great, thank you. We are now going to open up. You want to go before public comment? I'm not done with this item, but yeah, go ahead. Trustee Doss.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. One, thank you for being kind of the vessel for which we're able to kind of share our thoughts, right? It's not directly aimed at you or directly, aimed at anyone for that matter. It's more of a, getting that information out there so that we can really kind of get, and you just happen to be the person presenting it this time. But the last time, it was a different person presenting it, and I had the same reaction. So thank you for that, and I just wanted to make sure that, it wasn't like, kind of anyway.
I'm right there with you.
I know, and I've always appreciated that about you, actually. And then the other thing that, based on, I just want to make sure that it's on the record, for what Trustee Duran said and Trustee Boyd kind of seconded it. So I just want to make sure that it's on the record and that we move forward with that, because I think it's a really good idea.
Which idea is that? There have been a lot of ideas. That's why I'm asking.
Well, they just talked about, being more specific with the data and presenting it with the numbers. Just presenting it, additionally, so that we have, able to.
I pondered. I'll be honest with you. I pondered it because I saw it with numbers, and I thought, oh, this is just too many numbers.
Well, let's be honest. She didn't listen. I told her to put the numbers. She didn't listen. So she put them next time.
And the met or exceeded is a state way of doing it. You'll see it when you look at the dashboard also. So I copied that. But yeah, I can include the numbers for sure.
Great. So we can maybe consolidate some of these into one data request, so that, and I think just bringing it to the next discussion would be great. So now I am going to move to public comment. I don't see anyone in the room, but we do have a hand raised online, and I have no idea what to do about it. So Ms. Shent's going to facilitate.
I'm going to try.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. This is Linda Williams. I am the president of the Black Parent Advisory Group. I'm also a member of the Student Achievement Committee. And I've had my hand raised for a while, and I took it down, and I raised it back. Everyone pretty much has echoed or has already said what I really wanted to say. Trustee Doss, your words really resonate with me. As a Black parent, as a parent of a Black student in Albany, it is very disappointing that she has not had a Black teacher until the 9th grade. And and now she's in the 10th grade, and she has one Black teacher right now, and she may not have another one in the 11th or 12th grade. I only have a year and a half left as an Albany parent, and so I really would like to see this issue resolved within my time here as a parent. For the benefit of my child in particular. I'm sorry, I want all our children to do well, but it's very heartbreaking to come home and see my daughter being distraught and discouraged by school because she's not getting the help that she needs. It's very discouraging to know that we have less than 60 Black students and we can't help them. I've worked in a school where we had 600 students, and we were able to work individually with each of those students to bring their test scores up and to bring their grades up. And I don't know why we can't do that with 58 students. It doesn't make any sense. Not logically, it doesn't. And so I would really want to see that happen. We are paying for tutoring, and I don't know why we have to pay for tutoring when we go to school in Albany, which is such a high achieving school district. As the president of the Black Parent Advisory Group, we have already committed to doing something ourselves. If we can't get the support that we need from our teachers and from the district, we feel like we have to take this on ourselves and bring our students up with or without the support of our teachers and our district leadership, because it's our kids' lives that are on the line. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for your patience. Sorry for the long Zoom wait. So I think that we have our call to action here. I think we've all been on the same page for a long time, and we're looking forward to, oh, my time is up. We're looking forward to hearing about the next steps.
Thank you.
And with that, thank you so much, Director Sinclair. And we will move to our first review and action item, which is to open the public hearing to sunshine the negotiation proposal from AUSD to the Service Employees International Union. So I will, and there are supporting materials for this. Do you want?
He's getting to the vault about tripping the alarm. And it turns out they had a key. And not just any key. Remember, there was no record of anybody entering that
I have a
vault.
weird audio feed coming in. All right.
Oh, this one?
All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Marina Gonzalez, who's going to remind me how to run the public hearing.
So, thank you. Good evening, everyone. The public hearing is meant to sunshine, which is a process where both parties, the district will come, one of them is first, and then also the union, make public the articles in the contract that they want to negotiate for the upcoming negotiations. And so this sunshine is a proposal from the district to SEIU, and we are looking to sunshine these 4 articles.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to open the public hearing and see if there is any public comment. What's that? The other gavel. I'm going to close it.
There's no comment.
Hammer. All right, the public hearing is closed. And do we need to take a vote on, the public hearing itself is
It's just
not an
meant for
action
public
item.
comment.
Okay, great. And so next we do 14B, which is a public hearing to sunshine the proposal back from SEIU to AUSD.
Yeah, and so if you scroll down to the second page, you'll see that in the sunshine, they've requested to open every article in the contract, and that's because this is a full contract negotiation.
Great. I will open the public hearing for negotiations between SEIU and AUSD. Look around for public comment. I see none. Julie, let me know if I ever miss Zoom comment.
There are none in the Zoom.
All right, I will close the public hearing. And we will move to our last item for the night, which is to approve the district goals and objectives for the 2022-23 school year. Dr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Hinckley. Last board meeting, we had review and discussion and lots of discussions about the goals and objectives. The goals remain the same with some tweaks, meaning that we use the same language that we have in our strategic plan and our LCAP. And so you'll see that that's updated to reflect that as recommended. And you see the 5 goals for the district/superintendent. Goal 1, assess and increase academic success. Last time I read academic achievement, which wasn't aligned with the other 2 documents I just referenced. And then Goal 2, support the whole child. And then Goal 3, communication and lead together. And then Goal 4, financial stability, and then finally Goal 5, manage facilities and constructions effectively. So if we can move to the next page and get into each of the goals, starting with Goal 1, you'll see the adjustments we made based on the board direction. Goal 1, we have assess and increase academic success. The board president Hinckley summary at the last meeting was very helpful to make sure we had the language and reflected the board directions and instruction here. And so I'm not going to read them. You had a chance to do that on your own through the board packet, but I'm going to leave it up here for a moment for the public to peruse. And again, for the board, if they have any questions in this area.
So the intent tonight is to approve these. If we have minor wording changes, I think we can make those and still approve them. But hopefully this is not, hopefully this is a fairly accurate reflection of our discussion last time. Yeah. So we'll take one goal at a time. And is there any feedback on any of these objectives?
And
everyone okay with moving to Goal 2? All right. Can you scroll up?
And Goal 2 is in line with the other 2 documents referenced earlier, support the whole child. And then you have the 4 objectives here, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, all reflect exactly what the board provided direction on. And so this is really kind of for the public to take a peek at this point.
I have a question on this one for 2.2 because I'm not sure I remember this being so specific that we wanted to increase the number of adults to support student supervision and safety. Could you say a little bit more about what you're thinking?
Well, it was more of what the board was thinking. It came from the board. And so our thinking, based on the interpretation from the board, is that they were referring to, because health and safety was a highlighted focus, and our interpretation was more campus supervisor on our campuses, more adults present in terms of reorganizing how we supervise the campus to make it a more safe and pleasant and a deterrent for those who have no business on our campuses, i.e. our high school campuses and middle school campuses. And so that was our interpretation of what that meant.
Yeah, Vice President Duran.
Thank you. Superintendent, can you also comment on Objective 2.3, the home-to-school connection? What do you envision happening this year around that?
We heard from the board that it was important that we have parents and other people on campus working with the homes, mainly our disenfranchised communities, so that there is a connection and a relation opposed to the disconnect and the lack of relationships we have with those communities. And that was our interpretation. And so how we see that moving forward, you will see in our upcoming budget presentation around our block grants, where we have a home and community component in there, along with parent liaison recommendation as the board requested there to strengthen the home and school community and build relationships with those disaggregated communities, as you saw reflected in the data earlier.
Any other comments on any of these objectives? Yeah, Trustee Dana.
I was also confused about 2.2. I just, I'm not sure I remember the comment around increasing the number of adults on campuses. I thought it was like just in general around safety and like doors and entrances, but I could be mistaken. Is that not what was said last meeting? I don't remember.
So, yeah, Trustee Davidson.
Well, I think we had a discussion about not having all of our positions filled at the high school for our supervisors. But I'm not sure that that's an entire goal. And also, if we're going to increase the number of adults on campuses, I guess it would help us to understand, are we staffing those? And therefore, is that a budget domino effect? Or are we looking for volunteers? Like, what are the details of that? Or are we just filling positions we already have?
I was worried about that just because I kind of want to maybe prioritize what we just had a conversation about in terms of our budget.
Let me try to take one question at a time. One obvious one, are we filling positions we ever had? No, these are positions that after careful analysis that we noted that we needed. For example, at the elementary school, we have one campus supervisor and it's a male. Well, we're in great need of a female campus supervisor because of all those uniqueness that we need to support for our females on campus. And so that would be an increase. Likewise, at the high school, we only had one campus supervisor for 1,100 kids, and that's kind of a head scratcher. And so we added 2 more positions so that we have adequate numbers of campus supervisors providing support and safety for our high schools. And so the short answer is no, they're not positions we already had.
Okay, that provides a lot of clarity. I do want to also make, I don't know if it's later in the document as well, maybe no. So in that case, I'd like for us to focus on student safety in general with like the entrances as well, if we could make that maybe just a little bit more encompassing versus just talking about the addition of adults.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? I want to make sure I didn't miss any of that.
Yeah, for 2.2, when we say increase the number of adults on campuses, it feels very specific, and I'd really like it to be encompassing like other methods as well of increasing campus safety, such as possibly reviewing like the layout and how many entrances there are and that sort of thing. I think it was something that Trustee Duron was talking about. So I want to be mindful of what she said.
Yeah, I thought, so we had a lot of discussions about safety being a priority of the board, and we are having a safety audit done. The board approved a contract for a consultant to do a safety audit, and there may be a lot of recommendations that come out of that, which could relate to entrances, could relate to mental health support, could relate to traffic, and could possibly also recommend additional supervision staff. I guess I feel like objective 2.2 is kind of jumping ahead a little bit since the board hasn't had a chance to hear what those recommendations are and to spend funding on additional supervisor positions when we've already tripled the number of supervisors at the high school. I guess to me that doesn't really reflect a discussion that I remember having.
If I could clarify, 2 clarifications. One is that at the high school, there should be 3 campus supervisors, and there's only 1 currently. Is that correct, Superintendent?
And there's always been historically 1, period, up until this year through our reflection and comparative analysis of what schools typically have. And so instead of waiting for something to happen and then we have a knee-jerk reaction. We wanted to be proactive. In addition to that, we have the Superintendent Safety Task Force that's meeting on a regular basis that will address this angle around egress and all that other issues. And so that would be covered. And so when we were thinking about this, we were thinking about this more holistically. And so we will be having safety issues coming back to the board in terms of recommendation, 1, through our assessment, and 2, through our safety task force.
I guess the issue, as I see this, is there's no mention here of anything we're going to do related to safety except for adding more supervisors.
I think it's a huge thing that you've already started this year is the safety task force. So perhaps we could just adjust the wording on this one goal to say convene or oversee the superintendent's safety task force and respond to recommendations and needs, and then leave it at that. And we can all understand that you may, from that, decide to put more adults on campuses.
Can you say that again? And I think specifically including recommendations that come out of the audit that we have paid for. Yes.
Convene the superintendent's safety task force and then respond to recommendations from the task force and the district-wide safety audit.
So much.
That would be all of objective 2.2.
Can you repeat that again?
Okay.
Trustee Davidson.
Convene the superintendent's safety task force.
Just to mention, it's already been convened. I mean, it's.
But he did that within this year, and since these are our goals and objectives for this year, I feel like it's like a retroactive setting.
I see what you're saying. Okay, sure.
We can adjust it. We can change that word.
So you have that?
So convene the superintendent's safety task force, and then respond to recommendations from the task force and the district-wide safety audit.
Okay. Anything else on goal 2? All right, can we move to goal 3? Any comments or questions?
My comment is I really love this goal. I don't know who put it together originally, but communicate and lead together is so key. And I really hope that we will see the collaboration, the continued collaboration and transparency and inclusiveness of people from the broader community, including those that have not historically been part of that. Appreciate that.
All right, goal 4, financial stability.
Quick point of clarification. So with the goals, so we're just kind of going through and like minor changes, but no big change, because then we would have to go back and.
Right, but I don't mean to shut down. If you have a big change you think should be made, you should say it.
Not necessarily a big change, but if we could go back to goal 3 really quickly, I promise not to take too long. Increase outreach to and collaboration with stakeholders from historically disenfranchised communities and decision-making processes. We have groups currently within the district that have been put together. One of our community members called in, spoke about the Black Parent Advisory Group. I believe there's also a group for our Latinx students, and I believe that there's a group for our Asian students as well. So collaborating, with those groups as well, and I think maybe specifically putting it in the goal would be would be good to be very specific in terms of the additional outreach and communication that we'd like to see.
And I understand that, Trustee House. Here, I think the board was grappling with and being intentional about these groups who historically not been involved, so they wanted to be very specific here. I think what you're saying is open it up to everyone else as well?
No, I think he's saying, I think that he's saying included in this as part of that outreach and collaboration should be working with those parent engagement groups. I think you could add that as including working with parent engagement groups. I think the intent of this was, groups often involve parents who are already very involved in their children's education, right? So to only be interfacing with groups, even though it's an important step, it doesn't necessarily increase our engagement with families that have historically been disengaged. So I want to make sure that we keep the board's intent of how do we reach parents who've never visited the schools, who've never come to a meeting, who aren't reading emails because they don't believe that they have a real voice in the community. And so I think implicit in this was that we would use the engagement groups, we would try to use some of the other ideas that board members raise, like parent liaisons, but that we would, or specific outreach to IDT students, for example, but that we didn't want to limit ourselves to specific vehicles, especially our sort of well-established ways of dealing with sort of the same 20 parents over and over. Yeah, Trustee Davidson.
Well, I think we had the conversation about utilizing those as resources, and I also just think that maybe we could give that as the suggestion for what we would like to see in the how of the goals is incorporating those groups in your how.
Does that work for you?
Yeah. So it wasn't
It's one of the steps that he'll take.
Exactly. Not to eliminate what we already have there, but just in addition to. Thank you for your clarification.
And I think there was some agreement, too, that our work with those groups could certainly improve, right? Okay. Can we go back down to goal 4? Any questions or comments? Yeah, Vice President Duran.
Thank you. Question, Superintendent Wells, could you speak just briefly about target goal for long-term stabilization, fiscal stabilization? What does a target goal look like for you? Or for us, the district, rather?
We're going to spell that out in our how, but were you referring to which one?
I'm sorry, 4.3.
Oh, 4 point, identify a target goal for long-term fiscal stabilization. And that was over a period of time. And the way we interpret that, not just the current year and the 2 years out, but maybe exploring some years beyond the 2 years out.
So a target goal is, what is a target goal then? Identify a target goal? Is that years you're talking about?
Well, here, when we say identify a target goal for long-term fiscal stabilization, that was, to me, synonymous with stabilizing the district and reducing our deficit.
So I think this objective's been circulating for a while. And I think there's still lack of clarity or maybe some lack of agreement about what it might mean. I think it will come back to the Budget Advisory Committee to perhaps help guide. I mean, a target goal could be we want to have 9% reserves instead of 3%, or we want to eliminate deficit spending by year X, or we want to get deficit spending down to a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage. I think all of that has to be grappled with. Certainly it couldn't be clarified more right now, but I think we'd all like to see something, just, especially for those who looked at the attached budget documents to the ratification at the beginning of this meeting, we are significantly deficit spending every year, and we need to have a plan for that. So I think the goal could mean a lot of different things. I think we need the district office to help provide some guidance on what that should be.
And so it's going to move from me to the upside down me into a we, and that's where the budget advisory can really be helpful in this area. And that connects to goal 3, leading together.
Any other things on goal 4? All right, could you scroll down to goal 5? Yeah, Trustee Davidson.
I would love to see in our creative facilities utilization plan document that identifies how we are using space, the addition of and prioritizes student spaces. The reason for that is I really want to make sure that the spaces that our students are using are like up at the best level. And sometimes maybe we have other things that we want to do that are not quite as critical, and the students are interfacing with those facilities every day. So my priority would be that. I know it's changing the goal.
What was the language you suggested
And
adding?
prioritizes student-facing spaces or student-utilized spaces.
Okay, Trustee Davidson, can you give us an example of that? That would be helpful for me.
So I'm going to zoom in on my favorite school site that I visit every day. At Cornell, right on Solano, we're investing significantly in a building that students will not utilize on a day-to-day basis. And yet that site could use drinking fountains or gate codes so that our YMCA staff and other staff don't have to walk all the way around, or running water in some of the portables. So I think that our first responses should be to spaces that our students are in daily. And if we're looking at how we're using space, it should be using space that the kids are in first. And sometimes we have to put something on the back burner. There are many more examples district-wide that I could go into, but that's just where I am every day.
And I really appreciate that. Thank you. I'm just hoping it doesn't conflict with the goal of moving the district office back to Albany, because that means we would never come back.
Well, I think that's another objective that there was some back and forth about, and setting that type of a timeline. It'd be great to have the district office within our district, but I think if we have to do that at the expense of our kids' learning spaces and safety and well-being, that is a real thing that we should grapple with.
Well, I think, so, excuse me, Objective 5.3 can't happen without board approval, right? So when the plan is brought to the board, along with the facilities utilization plan under 5.4, then the board will have an opportunity, right, to weigh those different goals. And maybe the board will decide that based on the needs identified in the overall facilities utilization plan, that we would rather use all of our space, not for the district office. Or it may be that the plan that's presented to move the district office back to Albany doesn't impact any of those goals. So
maybe we just take out execute the plan, but create a plan with a timeline in 5.3.
Well, none of this stuff is done in isolation. It's all related. For example, when we have available space in Albany that we can use for district office, and instead we're paying $250,000 for a space in Berkeley, we're not being as fiscally responsible as I think we should, and we're not as. But if that's the board will, that's the board will. But I think my job would be to give a number of scenarios prior to the board voting on what it is they want to do.
I guess mostly it's just if we're making upgrades in spaces, then those should be prioritized in spaces that the kids are in day to day. And some of us adults might have to be in spaces that aren't as ideal for a little bit of time, and then we can get to those. But I think that's what I'm getting at is if we can't check the boxes on the kids' spaces first, then we're kind of backwards. Like, I think we can do both with the spaces that we have. And I think it's going to be really different next year when we have our elementary school at Marin back and we've added so much space at 2 sites.
And just to note too, 5.3 does not specify that the district office would be on district space, right? It just says Albany. So I think there is, room there. And obviously, if the superintendent were to create and present a plan to the board that the board voted down, then this superintendent certainly couldn't be held accountable for not meeting that objective, right? It may be worth, I think at some point, this objective was maybe worded as create and bring to the board a plan with a timeline, which just lets you off the hook or lets the board off the hook, I guess. Or we just leave it as is, knowing that ultimately this will all have to be discussed by the board. I think what's critical is that you can't make a decision about 5.3 without meeting objective 5.4, and that's why we have kept asking for that utilization plan so that the board can really understand how we're weighing different spaces for different uses, whether it's outside vendors or district office space or student classrooms or intervention space or what have you, that once we have the whole universe of district property available to us, the board needs the opportunity to weigh all of those things. So go ahead, Trustee Boyd.
I was just going to say I would support the create and bring to the board a plan rather than execute. Some memories might not be as long, especially since it won't be the same board. So I wouldn't want to be penalizing the superintendent.
Yeah, Trustee Dana.
I hope that we're also prioritizing the upkeep of the facilities that we're referring to in the plan, and possibly including it. I don't...
Saying prioritizing the upkeep?
Yeah, so we had the whole bathroom maintenance thing with the middle school, so that kind of idea.
Yeah, so we did kind of, as much as we talk about the bathrooms in our school system, that did kind of fall off, although if I remember some of our discussion about the providing support for students, I just got evicted from the Zoom again, I think. Provide support for students' physical, social, and emotional needs. We discussed some facilities issues in there,
Okay.
but I do think this issue of the sort that Trustee Davidson's raised a few times of just meeting students' basic physical needs on campus, water, bathrooms, I'm not sure where to build that in here.
Lucky for us, I think the Superintendent Safety Task Force is going to pick up the bathroom issue, and we just did that as a goal, so maybe it will just get swooped in, but if it doesn't, then let's make sure we get it on for next year's goals.
Yeah, that was just an example, and I wanted to make sure that, because it was the facilities area, so. Yeah.
Okay, so I did hear, I think, a majority support for amending 5.3 to say create and present to the board a plan. So replacing execute with present to the board. You got that? Okay. Any other issues with goal 5? All right. So we have 2 amendments. Oh, wait, I'm not on the Zoom. Oh, wait, yes, I am. I don't see any public comment. If you would like to comment on our goals and objectives, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will open the floor to a motion to pass the 22-23 goals and objectives with the 2 amendments that we have made.
I move that we pass the 22-23 goals and objectives with the 2 amendments. We need to list them.
We've got it, yeah.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All by myself there. All opposed? No abstentions? All right, the 22-23 goals and objectives passed unanimously. And we will look forward to hearing some updates, as you suggested they be sort of rolled out, maybe goal by goal or by specific objective, so that we can hear more about the plan to accomplish all of that in 10 months. All right, so that's, sorry, did you want to say something? Okay. All right, so that's the end of our items. Are there upcoming agenda items or additional matters on the board? Yes, Trustee Doss.
Some of these could be agenda items, and some of them I think can just be like expanded on or followed up on by the superintendent and the district. I'll let you all determine which is which. Interventions that we have in place and how we can expand those to all sites, special education interventions, and how we can take a look at those taking place outside of the school day instead of interrupting school time. School buses for all sports to and from away games. There's a number of reasons why I think that would be important. Safety is one, just with the recent things happening with students, safely getting students to and from activities and not having to rely on different rides and things like that. I think a lot of times leave students kind of just standing around by themselves versus, the safety of a school bus. So kind of determining how we can and then I also think that it's an equity issue as well, but just, providing that for all sports. Hiring practices, procedures, and recruiting practices. Moving the district back to Albany, that money could be used for kids instead of making whoever owns that property in Berkeley richer. The lunch and breakfast is really good. So like having like a tasting event for parents so that they could get more excited about it and increasing the numbers there. With increased numbers, I think that it will help us to expand the program for students and make it better. And the last thing is our Cougar field looks amazing, but the softball fields still look really bad. So as you walk into the brand new amazing field, it's like, whoa, this is like college level, like epic. And then you get to the softball field and you're like, am I still at the same school? So some maintenance there would be pretty cool, just to kind of match the brand new state-of-the-art Cougar field that we have. The baseball fields at the high school need that same attention.
I just have one thing, and that's to approve the dress code at the high school. I believe it currently just sits as a draft, and
It's an interim dress code, but it was approved by a committee of students, and I think that we wanted to funnel.
I've actually wondered why that never came to the board, because the site council, like a year and a half ago, we kind of moved it through, and then so Ms. Dallas was working on it, and is no longer here. So
She's left the district,
yeah,
I think.
so that's I have been wondering the same thing, because I believe it's finalized.
It is.
It is. I was on the committee,
Approved by
so.
the board. Yeah. Anything else? All right, our next board meeting is Tuesday, October 13th. Please come to the ribbon cutting, 9 a.m. Saturday, and run a mile so we can all see you. We're adjourned.